you did a price predictions for Bitcoin, for ETH, and you didn't do necessarily a price for Solana, but you just sort of gave your thoughts on where it ends up. I think it was for the end of this year, not the end of the cycle. Can you walk through your sort of thoughts around that and kind of what you're thinking in terms of, and maybe you have something to expand upon beyond just Bitcoin and ETH, but basically looking at the markets for this year, where do you think we end up?
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, my general thesis is that it's going to be a very constructive year for crypto. I kind of talked through that in the beginning. And once I think about these things still as sort of a beta off Bitcoin, so you're going to have a lot of strong inflows into Bitcoin, which the next trade is going to be Ethereum. And Ethereum is very easy to explain to TradFi people. And it's one of the reasons I got into crypto in general is like, you can say, hey, here's this quote unquote technology company that's earning quote unquote this revenue, and here's the multiple you can assign to it. And you're investing in, sort of the base layer of, the next virtual computer on the internet, blah, blah, blah. You can tell that story like pretty easily to TradFi. So I think there's a strong narrative there in terms of price appreciation for Ethereum, regardless of some of the challenges I mentioned earlier on kind of the L2 level that most people are not even going to try to delve that far, right? I do think the next thing in which we're seeing right now is Solana and other kind of single state focused layer one. So Solana, I think, is going to have a fantastic year, not only for, sort of the token improvements that you've mentioned, but also the huge developer mindshare and narratives that are forming there, including DePIN. Solana is sort of like the DePIN chain right now and becoming even more so as more applications are launched. So I think that's going to be obviously fantastic for price. And thinking about it very simply, I think Solana is like 1/10 the market cap of Ethereum. Just the economic weight for it to compete with Ethereum it has a lot more room to run, including getting back to some level of all-time highs, some percentage than it had previously. I do think there's some interesting opportunities too on other elements who are pursuing similar paths. Like we're seeing a lot of private market activity on Sui and Aptos, which I think is somewhat filtered into price, but still not all the way apparent for folks who are actual investors. So I think you're going to see a number of interesting applications there, and folks will be naturally drawn to actually moving over to those chains and trying a lot of those things that they've only tried so far on Ethereum and kind of Solana. So, I put a few numbers in the thread I made and more directional targets, but, I think it's going to be a really big year for crypto across the board. And if I'm trying to position personally, I want to be in more of the high beta stuff. And I still consider kind of Solana, Aptos, Sui in that camp. That's at the L1 level. Of course, the application level, there are a lot of winners that could be picked there, but I still think you're going to have a lot more luck trying to do that in either private markets or get in on, there's a lot of, if you're not a US investor, you can go on these launch pads, go on IDO platforms and form a nice portfolio of fairly valued assets at sort of an equal weight portfolio that you can generate there. As US investors, we can't really do that, unfortunately, but a lot of opportunities out there as well.
Sure. So sounds like bullish year, potentially all-time highs for things like Solana, maybe Bitcoin, Ethereum, et cetera. What would sort of break your thesis of this being a bullish year? Do you think we're reliant mainly on the macro? Or is it like crypto just needs to keep shipping, things need to happen well? Or is there anything that would break all this? And you're like, okay, if this happened, for sure, we're nowhere near all-time highs. Like, what are your thoughts on what may go against your thesis?
Primarily, the things that would go against my thesis, I think, are somewhat being solved for. So that's why I'm very comfortable being fairly long crypto right now, because number one, it would be regulatory. I think that's somewhat solved for. I'd be very surprised if we were going to see some sort of large bill that puts something, sort of a stake in the art of crypto in the US. I think that'd be very surprising at this point, unless Elizabeth Warren decides that that's like going to be her one thing she really wants to focus on and continue with the crypto army. Number two is certainly macro. Like, I think we're fooling ourselves if we experience some sort of 30 to 40% downturn that crypto is going to be up. It might be flat, but it's not going to be up. I think things are fine enough in sort of the broader macro environment, especially if we were to see some sort of issues. I think you'd see pretty swift rate cuts along with more complicated funding mechanisms like the bank term facility and other things that we've seen sort of step in. And then more broadly, I think we're fighting more against apathy than a downturn, right? Like, if those two things are okay, if we just don't see any of the innovations find any interest or traction with retail users that we've mentioned across this whole discussion we've had here, that would be the biggest thing we're battling against, is just general apathy. I just don't really care enough about this crypto thing. Keep your decentralization, keep your censorship resistance. I just need fun shit. And the games weren't as fun as you said, Tom. I don't really care about DePIN or tokens. apathy is, I think, what we're fighting most. And that would like invalidate my thesis if people just like don't care. But I guess what keeps me happy is like, I know people care about money. I know people care about making gains. And if like, this is the space that still has the opportunity to do that more up and above traditional markets, like there's always going to be interest.
Right. The other thing that I love about crypto is there's so many sectors that and use cases that like one of them's got to hit. You're like, maybe it's not gaming, maybe it's not DePIN, but like maybe it's stable coins, right? Maybe it's real world ads. Like there's something surely that's going to hit on chain other than just like PFPs. And so like, and we just need one of them, right? So I feel like you got a lot of chances, which is kind of like the internet, right? There was a bunch of things that could happen on the internet. Now, a lot of them ended up happening, but you just needed one sort of to really take off and then you're kind of good to go. And so I feel like you're going to have something, but we'll see.
Yeah. I mean, you're giving this new creative medium and expressive environment to a handful of the smartest people in the world. And to say that they're not going to paint some sort of interesting picture with it, I think is eminently naive. Whether that picture is something that we can predict is another story, but there's going to be something that is a lot more interesting and gains a lot more value than a lot of the incumbent systems.
Yeah, absolutely.